sometimes some people need to be incarcerated.
Yeah.
I needed to, it's bad to say, but I needed to be incarcerated because the direction I was going in life, they weren't gonna get it. You know what I'm saying? It was very destructive.
Our podcast narrator, Charles Newsome, sharing from his own experience.
Sometimes people need to be locked up to go on and get it back together. And so once you get it back together, once you get out, how are you gonna go about the plan that you put together in there? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And the most, your first thought need to be family. Mm-hmm. Because your mother does time with you. Your brother, your sister, your uncle, your father. You're not the only one doing time.
This is Season 1, Episode 3 of the SmartJustice podcast, Incarceration, Justice, and the Family.
Crime and punishment are hot topics. Are there solutions different than what we're hearing about at a national level?
We led the nation in all the wrong categories, especially when it came to child welfare and recidivism. Like, why are we dead last?
Now we're seeing illicit fentanyl as the #1 drug threat in our state, backed very closely with methamphetamine.
If you really want to focus on the kids, stop acting like you're going to use foster care to punish parents.
There is a different way to approach justice that has better return on investment.
Working with families on the prevention end is more cost effective than placing them in foster care.
That seems to strengthen both law enforcement and courts and tie that together with community resources.
Justice has to be served for civil society to exist, but the place of mercy falls in the hands of the people.
And then track the impact to communities and better outcomes. And we're calling this approach SmartJustice.
SmartJustice is a work of Restore Hope and partner organizations. Restore Hope is a software and services organization that helps communities achieve better outcomes for justice and child welfare efforts. SmartJustice is focused on optimizing the system by improving the relationships among its parts.
Thanks for joining us for this interview. I've got two friends of mine here with me, and I had the pleasure of working with these men for the past couple of years, trying to help communities here in Little Rock stop the violence and bring opportunity to it. But I'd like to introduce Charles Benson and Charles Newsome.
How you doing?
So Mack and Rock, their nickname. So anyway, we wanted to take some time and really talk about incarceration and the impact of incarceration on families, and if a lot of folks are incarcerated in a particular community, now that starts to have even bigger impacts. But if you would just shortly, let's talk about kind of incarceration and maybe any personal experience that you've had with that, and directly as it kind of impacted your families.
Well, I was going in and out of the county jail and prison since I was like 21. And it just, especially on my family, it was like a disappointment, but as well as a loss of a person, a loss of a personality, loss of a family member. Okay, our community's a poverty-stricken community. That's just the truth of the matter. And my going to prison and jail was taking a toll on my family's finances as well, because as well as them working and paying their bills, they were taking care of me in prison because I had no job.
How does that work, Mack? So what do you mean taking care of you?
Well, you have to, in prison, the food selection and the meals is not up to par. It's not the best. And to survive, you have to order commissary. And commissary comes from your own money, the money that's on your books.
Does everybody do that? Commissary?
Everybody does commissary, right? Majority of the ones that can afford it.
Right. What kind of things would you buy in commissary?
You buy food, soups, chips, but you also buy T-shirts and clothing and deodorant and things to write back to your family, pen, paper, envelopes, stamps. And those things are very precious in there because that allows you to contact other people out there and let them know how you feel, what's going on with you. So with me being locked up, I'm taken away from my family's income, their base income. So they're losing out to help to assist me. So I can have deodorant, so I can have t-shirts, so I can have letters and stamps. So that was my ass. I felt guilty. Like, I'm in here, I knew better. I'm gonna have to do the time for the crime, but also, where's the humanity in it? You know, everyone makes mistakes, everyone makes bad decisions, but we can't just keep piling on these things on a community that's already having problems, not just being poverty stricken, but just other elements in society is making it rougher and tougher. So yeah, I feel like I let my family down when I went to prison because I took out of my family's mouth, and it made me look very selfish. And it's a mental thing. You're in there all day with your thoughts of what you've done wrong, and you're constantly replaying this in your head. What I did wrong, it doesn't help to think about these things all day long because it has a negative aspect on your mental state.
On this topic of incarceration, what are the main things that our society, we the people, want out of incarceration?
Yeah, so traditionally, the things that we want from kind of punishment or justice, and then that would include incarceration. The first one is just deterrence. Is if you know that you'll be punished for speeding, for hurting somebody, then you're less likely to do it. And so deterrence is the first one. I'd say specifically with incarceration, the second thing that we want out of punishment is incapacitation. If you're robbing and stealing, you're scary, you're hurting people, we can put you in jail or prison, and then we've removed you as a threat to the community. And so incapacitation is something that is a value and is needed when people are hurting people. And then we start to get into a series of things that we want from justice. And so one of those things would be rehabilitation. Is if you're behaving poorly, then we want, as a part of our approach to justice, is we want you to start behaving well in a way that's pro-social.
Sure.
So it's beneficial not only to you, but to the rest of the community in which you're a part of. And so rehabilitation has a whole series and depth of approaches that include cognitive behavioral theory, criminal thinking, addiction, mental health. All those things would fit kind of in education. How do we rehabilitate there?
My name is Billy Inman, and currently I work for Restore Hope, and I'm the program manager for the Restore Hope Reentry program in the Pulaski County Jail. Recently, in November, retired from the Department of Correction, 27 years there. The last 7, I was a deputy warden. Now, it's a difficult environment for rehabilitation and incarceration because you have so much that's going on within an institution, whether it's the jail or prison. So many influences that it's not like maybe being at a treatment facility where you are immersed in a treatment environment. In a jail or a prison, you have all kinds of things hitting you that you would really like to protect folks who are in treatment from.
To be honest, when you go into prison, you're not rehabilitated. You go in and you're actually it looks like you're becoming a better criminal.
How so?
You're around other guys who committed different crimes. Everybody's talking about how good they were at their crime.
Yep.
No one's talking about rehabilitation and getting better.
No bad hustlers, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's talking about their greatest hits.
Man, everybody's the best hustler, thug, gangster, everything. But no one's talking about how I can better myself while I'm in here so it trickles down to when I get out. Everyone's trying to be better at being bad than trying to change from being as bad as they were to being better at being good, or better at being a father, better at being a good uncle, a better brother, a better son, a better husband. So see, those are the things in society that are needed to make human beings better. See, if you're in an environment where everything is bad, you're going to continue to do bad things.
What are some of the unintended consequences that come out of incarceration. I mean, we have those things we want out of it, but maybe there's some things that are coming out of that that aren't what we would have hoped.
You break into my house and you steal some things from me. The direct consequence, we can put a number value on the stuff you stole. You took $10,000 worth of my stuff, which is felony level, and I'd be mad at you. The unintended consequences start to be the number of victims that are in my house. Got a lot of kids, we feel unsafe, my neighbors feel unsafe. It starts to impact our behavior and the way that we feel. It could impact the children's achievement at school and the way that they're acting, could impact our spending habits. All those things. The neighborhood suffered a wrong by you coming and breaking into my house and taking my things. But when we incarcerate you, we catch you and we incarcerate you, you have children at home also, and you've got people that are depending on you. So now we've taken you out of the community because you're a threat. And we put you in for, on average in Arkansas, you'll serve just over 4 years, which is at $25,000 a year. It's about $100,000 of direct cost. But the unintended consequences are the impact that would have on your family, and if you're employed at all, the employer that's there. And so while I'm not saying that we shouldn't incarcerate you because you were a threat, you're breaking into people's houses and scaring folks and basically being a menace in the community. I'm saying that there is more than just the direct cost of 3 hots and a cot for you for 4 years and the 50% likelihood that you're going to return within 3. There is impact to your children and their future outlook. How likely are they to actually graduate high school, to get a job, to have meaningful relationships and kids of their own, and that's degraded quite a bit. How likely is it that your wife and your kids are going to go on public support because you're missing now, and she bears the full brunt of having to keep it all together while you're gone? How likely is it that that relationship survives? And so we start to go down the complexity hole pretty quick.
Now, you did your time in state.
Yeah, I did state time.
You did some jail and some state time. And Rock, you did yours at Fed time?
Yes, sir. Federal prison.
What was your experience as it relates to kind of your ability to stay connected with family, or was it similar to Mack's?
Very similar. And then just to piggyback off Mack, not only economically, but thought-wise and well, it's the psychosis of it, as you would say it, because your mother does time with you. Your brother, your sister, your uncle, your father. You're not the only one doing time, because they're constantly worried about you. They're constantly gonna be thinking about you. How's he doing? And being in the feds, you don't do time in your home state all the time. So I was always here. There, I was in California. I was in Oklahoma, I was in Tennessee, so they have to travel. It costs to travel.
Travel to come see you on visitation?
Right, and then they make it so hard for them to get in. You're not wearing this, you're not wearing that. So they might have to come, then leave, go redress, come back. So it's a lot that goes on emotionally.
Yeah.
So what are just practically some of the things that you need when you're coming out of prison?
Everything. You do. It's a start over. Yes. It's like rebooting. It's a two-way street, because first of all, you're happy to be out, but then you're scared also. Like, what
are you scared of?
What are you gonna do? Who's gonna give you a job?
Times have changed too.
You have to reconnect. If you had children before you went in, how long were you in? Like, Charlize was 13, 14 when I came home. When I left, she was 2 months. And when I come home, she's 14 years old. So how do you rekindle that relationship? Now you're a father, so you got responsibilities off the top. So those are the type of things that you're thinking about. That's the scary part of it. Who's gonna have?
Did you feel prepared for that?
Nah. Plus, every parent, the first child you mess up. It takes about a third when you probably got it right. But when you're coming out of prison and it's your first time coming into like full-fledged fatherhood, you might not get it right.
Yeah.
So, and then the child might have
feelings of abandonment. You left me. Ooh. So you have to deal through those issues. Your mother's older, your father's older, your grandma might have passed while you was in there. That's another major thing about being incarcerated too, Paul. You lose family, and then you're not able to connect with the family, and then it turns you into a cold-hearted person. So you have to rebuild emotions, because once you're incarcerated, man, you have to totally disconnect from the free world. So you have to reconnect to the free world, and if you don't, then you are institutionalized. And you're in that much danger of going back into that institution, because you have no, how can I put it? You have no desire to be free, because you have adapted to this incarcerated environment.
On the topic of children and also on the topic of the unintended consequences of incarceration, what are we looking at as far as generational incarceration? I mean, is that a common thing that we're seeing in Arkansas? Is that an issue that is part of what we're hoping to address in the concept of smart justice?
The statistics show that if you're a child and one of your parents was incarcerated before you hit 18, then you start to, that's actually one of the traumatic factors. So you'll get one, at least, on an adverse childhood experiences score. And that starts to show predictive outcomes for you, both medically, so physically and behaviorally. And your outcomes start to diminish greatly, and you being able to achieve self-sufficiency and happiness and those things. And so, yes, what we do see is if incarceration is common in the community that you grow up in or live in that environment, if that's a part of your family history, then you are more likely to experience incarceration as you age. So yes, there is a cyclical nature to the environments that you grow up in, whether that be good or bad.
I spent most of my career in Newport at either the Grimes or the McPherson unit. And so the McPherson unit's a women's prison, the Grimes unit's a male prison. So a lot of times we may have the wife at McPherson, the husband at Grimes, maybe one of the children at Cummins. I fielded a phone call from a woman one time whose husband was at Cummins, her son was at Grimes, and she's trying to figure out, imagine that visitation issue, having to go from northwest Arkansas to Cummins to visit the husband, then on a different day having to go from northwest Arkansas to Newport to visit your son. And so you do see a lot of that generation. We have entire families locked up in prison. And so there is a generational aspect. For some folks, that's all they know. And that's the cycle we're trying to break in the jail. That's one of the things I tried to help folks understand in prison is there is a better way than what you're doing, and just try to get them to that point where this is where that cycle breaks, because it's got to break somewhere, or as a society we'll never get past it.
Hey, I do want to talk about the impact on the community because from what y'all have shared, a lot of folks in your community at the time that you were doing time, a lot of other people were doing time too. Not just men, but a lot of the men were doing time. So what kind of impact does that have on a community?
There's no male figures, so that leads them to the game quicker. So now
What's that?
They're looking for a brotherhood, or they're looking for a father figure, or uncle, or uncle.
So the gang will
take over the family. Masculine alpha men teaching another man the wrong things to do. Right. Instead of them teaching him the right thing. So he's growing up thinking, I'm a man, but I'm doing the wrong thing as a man.
So one of the unintended consequences you're telling me is more crime, because the kids that are left behind are more likely to find their way into a gang.
It's going to be a rotating door to the penitentiary. Yeah, like that. Because now you're left, and then the men that you did see go to prison, that influence is left on those children coming up. So now Charlie Mack and Charlie Rock gone, the only memories they have are bad memories.
horrible
men. They're shooters, they're drug dealers, so they're gonna grow up to be the shooters and the drug dealers instead of going to college. But they don't have anything but their mother there, and she might have to work all day.
So she's not in the home talking to the child because he's out in the street. While she's at work, he's in the streets.
Right.
He's in the streets getting his lessons from the streets. The streets are teaching. He's not going to school. He's not learning anything in school. And if he is in school, it's probably for the girls. But it goes back to the man who left the family.
Right.
And that's a lot. And then these, like I was saying, I felt guilty when I was in jail. A lot of us feel guilty. We left something behind. We left so much behind. And our children, what are they going to do?
It goes back to the first question that you had, how does it affect the community? Because now a father has left a household, and then he didn't leave a good impression before he left. So now you have a community full of fatherless homes, and it's just gonna keep on rotating. That young man growing up, he feel like he don't have to support a family. His father wasn't there. So if he out making babies, he's not gonna have the thought process of being a father to that child. A lot of men being incarcerated out of the community is very dangerous for that community.
So I'm a businessman listening to this podcast. And so I'm a numbers guy. What does it look like from the perspective of what's the return on investment for the taxpayer, for our community, as far as incarceration is concerned in Arkansas?
What we'd say is incarceration is the most expensive form of punishment that we can exact, and has a fairly low return on investment as far as recidivism. Recidivism is the measure of someone that gets out of prison. You know, typically within a 3-year period of time, do they come back or not? And in Arkansas, as well as many other states, you know, about half of everyone that gets out is going to be back within 3 years. And so you've got 3 hots in a cot and safety and all the other things that you provide when someone is locked up. And those are direct costs. They're indirect things that happen. And what we're saying is we can move upstream from incarceration and think that we can spend less money and impact the number of people that we need to incarcerate. And then downstream from incarceration, there are certain things that could happen that could increase the likelihood of someone that's done their time getting out and staying out.
Judge Phelps, chairman of the Arkansas Parole Board, has seen thousands of people transitioning out from incarceration.
Parole Board, primarily our main involvement deals with the release of individuals that have been sentenced through a court of law to a term in the Arkansas Department of Correction or the Arkansas Division of Community Correction. Once they have been incarcerated and they become eligible for parole, then they come before our parole board and we make a determination about their release back into society. We look at a lot of different variables as far as a determination about release, and then once they're released, what type of conditions do we place on those individuals while they're under supervision.
You had also mentioned there was a distinction between where you might do time between the ADC and the ACC. What's the difference?
The difference is that ADC, I guess you could look at it and say it's the catch-all. It has everything from someone that passes hot checks all the way up to capital murder. ACC is a facility where the judge has to specifically sentence them to ACC. It's low-level crimes, no violence, short sentences, and the main thrust of ACC is the drug alcohol rehabilitation. So it's more of a therapeutic, different from prison where they go out and do a lot of manual labor. With ACC, it's pretty much class time and completion of drug alcohol programming.
I think your ACC facilities, do they have a license, a treatment license?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Absolutely. And there's about 5 of those around the state. both men and women, and they have a pretty good success rate, a little bit better than the Department of Correction does on recidivism.
How many folks every year in Arkansas, on average, actually make parole? How many folks leave our prisons?
I think it's probably somewhere between about 8,500 and 9,500 a year that are released out on parole. We probably see somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15,000 a year that we look at for parole consideration. So it's a rather large number, but that just is a reflection, I think, of the recidivism issue that the state of Arkansas has, or the repeat offenders. Again, those
Can
that
you
get
define
back out.
recidivism?
Right, recidivism is where a person is returned back to incarceration after 3 year or less period. And so we, look at, take that into consideration. How many times have they been incarcerated? Is this their first incarceration? Have they been a repeat offender for many, many times? Those are the things that we look at.
And what is the recidivism rate in Arkansas?
I believe for the Department of Correction, it is probably somewhere around 47.5. And for the Department of Community Corrections, it's about 35, I believe. One thing that has really been a positive for me in my time on the parole board has been the reunification of families. When a husband or a wife or son or daughter, again, have spent time in the penitentiary and they've been released back out, and they come to that place, maybe it's the second or third time they've been incarcerated, but they come back out and that light comes on, that proverbial light, and they realize, my mom and dad, they worked all their life to support me, to, get me to the place in school or whatever it may be, and I've kind of made a wreck of it. Again, when dad goes to prison, most of the time that's the breadwinner. And that may be leaving a wife and 2, 3, 4 kids at home that suffer the consequences of that. I've heard it said many times before, when husband's incarcerated, the family is too, because it's such a anvil around their neck that they just can't seem to break that cycle that's out there. And it's again great to see again that light come on for individuals. They come out with a different attitude than they've ever had before. They seek employment. They understand how precious life is. To have the opportunity, because they will see many times, repeated hundreds of times over, individuals that have not come to that place and just continue to recidivate back to the penitentiary in Arkansas.
Scott McLean leads Pathway to Freedom, an organization that works with incarcerated and recently released individuals to find success in life after prison.
Some of the things that we want to see happen is change the way they think and how they see life, giving them other alternatives to look at other than the way that they were brought into prison thinking on a false belief. So we want to be able to change and let them know that that belief may not be a fact. So change the way you're thinking so that you can change the way you live your life, so that you can find common ground somewhere and live more healthier and productive on the outside. What the state has done is given us a 200-bed facility that we can accommodate these particular prisoners inside those walls, located there in Wrightsville at the Hawkins unit for males. So excited about the opportunity we have to see lives transform, not only in the pre-release section, but also once they've been reintegrated back into community into the post-release sector of the program. Once guys reintegrate back into the community, then we will provide wraparound services for them, which could include mentoring, you name it, trying to find them employment and developing skills prior to them leaving prison, also working with them in the community while meeting their criminogenic needs, whatever those needs may be. so that they don't recidivate and create more crime victims and go back to prison. When we talk about the pre-release program, they will go through an assortment of post-release, pre-release program classes, life skill classes. That could be from family, parenting, substance abuse, computer classes. We have an entrepreneurship class that they would go through. We have mentoring classes that they go through. When you talk about prison culture, we understand what prison culture is. It's not conducive to growth. And we think about the golden rule. The golden rule says, love your brother, do good unto others. Well, prison culture don't speak to that. Everything opposed to that. So we want to change culture in order to change behavior. When we talk about love, we talk about serving, we talk about developing better skills so that you can one day become the model that your son or your daughter needs you to be, or your family needs you to be. And so we're excited about those factors there. So when we look at the structure of the program, the thing that we know, we want some changed men. When we look at the history of it, right now, roughly 80,000 adult offenders are incarcerated on probation or parole in the state of Arkansas. What do we do about it? They're coming, but they're getting out. Not all people are staying in prison. Roughly about 90% or so that will be released within time. And so it's all of our issue when we talk about community that we have to deal with and try to provide those support systems in place so that they won't recidivate, create more crime victims, because at the end of the day, we're left to deal with it. Cost, when you look at cost to house someone like that, $23,000 a year, we can't continue to do that and build more prisons. We can't keep up with the cost. Inflation's great right now, and so we're trying to save money so that we can all live and not having to deal with the inflation, the rise of costs and everything, because we can't afford it. It's too high. It's too high.
So when we incarcerate someone, if they're going to get out, and the vast majority of everyone that's incarcerated is coming back.
Okay.
And so I'd say in the simplistic view, as a member of the community with kids and hopefully soon grandkids running around the community, if we incarcerate someone, when they come back, we want someone better. What we want back is someone who's prepared to be a community member. And so enter the complexity again. You need a good needs assessment and a psychological assessment, and then you build a plan for that person, I'd say from day one of incarceration to get out. One of the things that we did in 1994 in the big crime bill that was passed as violent crime was kind of surging around the country was we started incarcerating people longer, but one of the things that was really short-sighted of us, I think, was we stopped paying for Pell Grant. The federal government will give you a grant to go to higher ed. And so we stopped doing that inside of jails and prisons as a part of that crime bill in 1994. Realizing that most folks that we lock up have educational needs that need to be met. They maybe haven't completed high school. And in today's technological society, there are certain things that we need you to have a high school diploma or a GED so that you could even go on to earn a technical certificate. We are in the process right now of reinstating Pell. During the Obama administration, they picked some exploratory or experimental kind of schools. There were 2 that were selected. And next summer of 23, my understanding is the U.S. Department of Ed is going to make that widely available to any Title IV school. So now all of a sudden we have the ability for a school to access Pell on behalf of an inmate, and we can start to teach school for folks that are locked up. And the last study I saw prior to the 94 bill was that every educational attainment, so someone that didn't have GED that got GED, someone that got an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, at every one of those achievements, recidivism went down. Those that were in the group that had earned a master's post-incarceration had a 0% recidivism rate. If we can redo that kind of with modern data, you could almost just say, all right, get a master's, you're out.
Yeah.
You know, you would be a good community member. Now, that's not all that's needed. There is something that's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And so some folks actually have criminal and addictive thinking. So if someone's high risk to recidivate, there are these risk scores that are out there, then you need somewhere between 200 and 240 hours of CBT, quality CBT engagement, and that will significantly reduce their recidivism rates on the outside.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Correct. Mm-hmm. You know, the factors that occur in recidivism are lack of job opportunities, lack of transportation, housing problems, addiction problems, and behavior problems. Mm-hmm. And so we need, when someone comes into one of our prisons, we need to do good assessments on them and then kind of build this plan for how is it when you get out, because almost everyone gets out, how are you going to be a good community member? I've got kids still at home. Mm-hmm. And if you maintained a 5-year kind of addiction, you were strung out for 5 years prior to us incarcerating you, and you didn't have any job skills, and you got out on parole after 4 years inside, and you moved next to me, and you're sitting out on your porch as I'm driving to work, leaving my wife and kids there. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not comfortable with that. Right. But instead, if you came out and you had been actually through a work release program and had been working for several years mm-hmm. and had some educational attainment, and I waved to you because you're getting in your car going to your job too, good with that.
I got out running. I knew I was intelligent. I was always reading in prison, always learning more. But I knew that if I got a degree under my belt, it would improve my way of life. It would improve my income rate. It would improve a lot. And I think I read a statistic that a bachelor's degree or any kind of degree adds $10,000 extra to your income capability. And I wanted that. I wanted to go farther. So I got out. One of my best friends and my business partner, Turtle, Antoine Jones, told me about Arkansas Baptist College. And I didn't think I could go because in the stories in prison was where they were telling me that if you had a criminal felony background, you couldn't get in school. So I asked Turtle, and he was like, "Nah, man, look at me. I've been locked up before Fed. Look at me, I'm in school." So I took his advice, registered, and God opened up doors. And it just kept improving. And what we don't understand is when you want to do right by yourself, you can call whatever your higher power is, but he sees that. And he reaches out and he grabs. If you take one step, he takes 2 steps with you. He helps, and that's what I kept doing. I kept going to church. I kept going. I was still and when Charlie Rock got out, I was still hanging around my guys in the neighborhood. But I knew that I had to focus on something. Don't get me wrong. I love my neighborhood. I love my homies and my friends. But they also understood Charlie Mack doing something bigger than this. And they supported me. They didn't talk down on me or disrespect me or whatever, bully or whatever. They didn't. They supported me 100%. And you know what happened after that? Turtle and I influenced other guys from our neighborhood to go back to college. So we have several college graduates in our neighborhood now. And I'm not tooting my own horn, but be beat. Mm-hmm. Because our influence helped other men and other people in the community. They saw those were some bad guys, I remember. But if they can change their lives, if they can make a difference, if they can make mental changes and become stronger, I can too.
And so on the topic of incarceration, as far as the work that's the SmartJustice approach that we're trying to talk about here, what are the steps? What are steps that can be taken? What's the order of those steps to try to, as you often say, go upstream of the problem of incarceration, get ahead of it, not just react, but hopefully prevent if possible?
A SmartJustice approach would start to look at the system of systems that exist in all of our communities. And we would start to go upstream. and say, what are the factors that are present in the majority of people that are being incarcerated in jails or prisons? And are there ways that we can find these individuals before they've gotten into the state that they are now, where we must incarcerate? So are there indicators through the schools with their children? Are there indicators through a misdemeanor court, like an unpaid fee or fine that we have to issue a warrant to suspend driver's license? Are there ways that, did they come into a DHS office and ask for help? Or into a church and ask for help? If so, there's probably a set of very complex needs that they have. And if we can figure out how to engage there, then it's much better money, time, and effort spent instead of watching the slide into multiple areas of crisis and the damage that's done not only to the person, but to their family and to community members. I think there's all kinds of opportunities for the group that has been coming together in Arkansas to try to do some things on the front end of the felony being committed that would be a much better spend in assets if we can help divert some from ultimately committing violent crimes or being scary in the community. And so those dollars on the prevention side or the alternative side, I think are well spent. That's the argument that we're trying to make and trying to show through demonstration projects.
Demonstration projects like what?
Well, there are several communities that are actually enacting what would be community diversion or alternative sentencing programs. There are police departments that are engaging in things that are instead of making the arrest, right, diverting the individual.
My name's Danny Baker. I'm the police chief at Fort Smith Police Department. The number of years that I've been in the criminal justice system, we've been doing it pretty much the same way for a long time with no appreciable gain on what we're trying to fix. In fact, if anything, it's gotten worse. And so for that reason alone, I would say we need to be looking at alternatives. We need to be looking at new solutions. People generally understand that there are folks that need to be removed from society for a period of time, sometimes permanently. I think that there's an understanding of that, but I also think that people are beginning to realize that maybe we've used incarceration as a tool to solve a lot of society's problems that wasn't the best tool to use. And I think that that's resulted in a lot of folks that have been put into a system that is not designed to fix them or support them. I think we need to be looking very hard at trying to fix the underlying problems. It seems that the answer to any crime issue or any way that bad behavior manifests itself in our society, the go-to response is to build more prisons, to build more jails, to expand jails, to make it possible that we can put more people in jail, incarcerate folks. It's interesting that we don't have that same mindset. That's not the automatic go-to when we have a public health issue. When we have, for instance, the pandemic, the recent pandemic, COVID-19, our automatic response to that was not let's build more hospitals. Our response was let's figure out how we can combat this problem, this virus, and prevent it and stop it. Let's build more hospitals so that we can put more people in hospitals. And so I think if we maybe looked at some of society's issues and some of the problems that we're experiencing and things that we've dealt with through incarceration as in those terms, and how can we solve the problem? How can we go to the root of the issue? How can we fix the person? How can we fix the problem that's manifesting itself in behavior that we don't like to see in society? And so we reduce the need for incarceration, and we wind up with a better society overall as a whole. Criminal justice, or law enforcement, we seem to be the ones most poised to be able to do the most effective and immediate intervention just because of the nature of what we do. I mean, we're the first ones to respond when someone calls, for a problem. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best answer either. And we're starting to figure out that, sometimes there's options other than sending a cop. I think that the community as a whole has to be working together. I think that, silos are easy. Sometimes it's easier to work in a silo, but it's never the best option. And so when everybody in the community works together toward the singular goal of trying to improve the individual and thereby improving the community that the individual lives in, I think that's how you get ahead of and get upstream. And for every person that you can do that with, you're having an incredible impact on so many other lives in the community. The long-term benefit of investing in people and investing in their issues and trying to make them whole, the gains are far greater, long-term gains, and they're much quicker as well. We're seeing that daily in Fort Smith. It's becoming common knowledge, I guess, that we've reduced our incarceration rate for the last 2 years over 40%. So we've cut nearly in half the number of people that we're taking to jail, and our crime rate is not reflecting negatively the impact of that. In fact, last year we saw a 5.6% reduction in overall crime. Well, many areas of the country are seeing marked increases. There is a connection, I believe, in the way that we're approaching, and it's diversion done right. Now, you can't just say we're just not going to deal with the problem. We're just not going to arrest people. We're just not going to make contact with people. That's not a solution. But diversion done right, where you empower your police officers, you empower those that are out there on the front lines to have alternatives, to look for alternative solutions than just taking someone to jail. And so we've tried to do that at Fort Smith. We've tried to provide opportunities and options that the police officer can exercise that discretion in a positive way, and not just saying, I'm just going to walk away and not do anything. No, I'm going to take a vested interest in you and who you are. And that starts with our vision at the police department, to make sure that, for one, that we use every encounter with another human being as an opportunity to improve them. And we're working toward a day when we're not needed anymore, when our services as police officers are no longer needed, that folks are able to take care of themselves. We're not ever going to get there in this world. There's always going to be a need for police. There's always going to be a need for first responders. And there's always going to be that need to put those really bad people in jail, those that just refuse to make right decisions or, for whatever reason, just can't function with the rest of us without endangering us. So we don't think that we're going to ever reach that day, but we're going to shoot for it. And that's what a vision is. It gives us direction. And so, we look for those opportunities, and we and I, as the administrator of the police department, my command staff, those that are here, they make sure that we empower our police officers to take the time to invest in people, take the time to find alternatives. If you can do something that's going to improve them and you don't have to take them to jail, then let's do that.
Chief Baker told a story one time of a few of his officers. They got a call, and some young kids were outside close to a street. And so they got called in, and both the parents were asleep inside, and there was a door whose lock didn't work. And so they could have called DCFS because the children were outside. They could have been hurt by walking into traffic in the street. Instead, the officers went down to the Walmart, bought a lock, and installed it with their own money and installed it themselves. It wasn't necessarily a crime that was committed, but now there was a positive in this community. There was a positive interaction with law enforcement that happened, and they addressed the problem that allowed the children to get outside the house in the first place.
But it was just this intentional, deliberate effort to work with his family to try to find solutions other than just, well, you're just a bad parent, and if you can't figure this out on your own, then the state needs to get involved, and we need to take the kid in foster care. It's just, story after story after story of that kind of thing. I have said many times that, officers have always had discretion, but they never really had the means to exercise that discretion. And so we try to provide that here. Our pre-arrest diversion program, that is one of the ways that they can exercise their discretion. We've implemented a mobile booking station and actually had legislation changed so that we could fingerprint and photograph someone in the field for a minor misdemeanor, Class A misdemeanor, which before that they had to be taken to jail. They had to be booked into jail and processed. Got the law changed, and now we have this mobile booking. We just book them there in the field, and we issue a signature bond and release them. And so we completely divert them from the incarceration. When we announced publicly that we were implementing a crisis intervention team, that their job was going to be to address mental health and folks in crisis in a new way. People in the community, the providers, faith-based organizations, hands went up all over the place saying, hey, you may not know I'm here, but I am, and here's what I offer. Here are the services that I offer. And so they became a hub, a network hub of services in Fort Smith. And just recently, we also, we being the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee in Fort Smith, the county judge, and several others, district judges within the criminal justice system, got the legislation changed so that we could do sobering facilities. Before, we really had no choice. If somebody was intoxicated in public to the point that they were a danger to themselves or others, we had to take them to jail. Well, now we can take them to a sobering facility. If we're able to get just one person out of addiction and diverted from the criminal justice system and instead constantly being picked up and arrested for public intoxication or disorderly conduct or all the other things that are often associated with that, again, that's going to have such a monumental impact on our community as a whole. And then I think our community policing efforts in general, they help with the just the overall health of the community. The community trusts us. They believe that we're really there to help them, and they want to work with us. They want to partner with us to do that. And so we find ourselves not running into roadblocks like we used to. Folks are willing to work with us. They're willing to talk to us. They're willing to help us solve crimes, and that has an impact on your crime rate.
And so we need to go upstream and impact the communities in which poor outcomes are coming. That's the place to invest. And if we do that, if we can invest in the families and we can try to keep the families together and we can make them stronger and we can provide opportunities up here, then it's going to prevent a lot of people from getting into kind of the prison pipeline, if you will. It'll prevent a lot of misery and it'll stop a lot of the cyclical nature of this. And that's not to say that we don't continue to help people all along the way. I'm saying that focusing just on like a release from prison program is short-sighted. We need to push back all the way as far upstream as we can get.
Steps have been taken
to
engage people ahead of time, but stuff still happens.
Sure.
Someone gets arrested. What are steps that can be taken at that point?
Yeah. So, I've had judges and law enforcement tell me that they have certain discretion, but they don't have options. And so, what we need to build to be able to offer law enforcement and prosecutors and judges kind of these options is they need to know what they would be sending someone to. So you need a good assessment. You just don't need to send everyone down to school. Maybe that's not the right thing for everyone, and maybe it's definitely not the right thing for some people at the stage that you meet them. They have some other issues before you can go to school. So you need a good holistic assessment on social determinants of health. And then you start to build a plan for that individual that the judge is fully aware of, so the court knows about it or the prosecutor knows about it and is bought in. And as long as the person's working that agreed upon program, there's encouragement. And if they don't work the agreed upon program, then you ratchet it up. And that's what's happening in part in a lot of these district courts is you can go to school and get a job, and we'll count that as good to some fines and fees and community service and even some jail time. Because you're investing in yourself and your family, and that's a community good. If you don't do that, then we're going to start to ratchet things up. Maybe you will do jail time. Maybe you even get some additional jail time. And so it's not an ignoring of bad behavior. It is taking a holistic look at what's the best money that we can spend. And I always think giving our law enforcement judges and the individuals options is the best thing that we can do. Now, to do that, you've got to be able to have the aligned help that someone might need, like substance abuse and mental health and housing and job and employment and schools. You've got to be able to have those folks partnered together, and you've got to have a software system in which you can track. So the judge with these huge dockets and the prosecutors, they just need to be able to see who's performing, who's not performing, what do I need to do now, and to be able to know that, that justice is being carried out.
All right, let's talk about personally what it was like when you were re-entering the community from prison, specifically with your family.
Well, I had a good support system. And let's be clear, one of the key things to successful reentry is your support system. Who you get out to, who you hang around when you first get out, that's very essential. It's very important because it can make or break your reentry program, your reentry process. If you don't have a strong support system, you don't have people out there encouraging you, helping you, put you in a place to win, in a successful place, it's not gonna work. My support system was amazing. I had family, I had church family, I had friends, I just had people that were willing to put their neck on the line to help me succeed.
But before we go on, Paul, here's the major decision right here. You're free. Are you going back to you gonna get this easy money? Or are you going, hey, let's straighten up. We gotta do it this way. Hey, it's work time now. Now you have to get a job. Now you have to get a career. Do you want to go to school like Mack did? What are you going to do on the positive side? Are you going to run back with this gang? Or are you going to let that part of your life go? Are you going to become a family man? Things like that. So that's the first major decision. Are you going to hit those streets? Or are you going to do it right this time?
Decisions.
How's the family play into that?
Majorly, yeah. Because that's the decision. That's why you come to that crossroad. Because am I gonna be with my family, or am I gonna go down this road again and I can end up being back reincarcerated, or I can get killed and I'm gone for good. Now you leave them forever, and then this next time you might not get no parent. You might get that 40-year sentence. You might get that life sentence. So there's no more coming home. So that decision is the most important decision right there, and it highly affects your family.
Like with me, my family was so important, I didn't want to let them down again.
Right.
I didn't. I couldn't take that letting them down again. I've been to the penitentiary once, and I only served like 2 years at the most. And when I got out, I just had a new lease on life, I feel like God gave me another opportunity, and I'm not gonna lose this opportunity. I'm gonna make my people proud. I'm gonna pretty much make them forget that I was ever locked up.
Thank you for listening to Charles and my story. We hope that you learned something from it and you can take something from it. Thanks to Paul Chapman and 100 Families and Restore Hope. In our next episode, we discuss child welfare, foster care, and ask the question, what about the kids? Thanks again for joining us. And always remember, there's always hope.
Charlie Mack and Charlie Rock are part of Empowering My Environment, a group of leaders working to reduce the violence and increase the opportunities in their neighborhoods. Check out their weekly show on their Empowering My Environment Facebook page. Special thanks to this episode's guests, Charles Benson, Charles Newsome, Billy Inman, John Feltz, Scott McLean, and Danny Baker. Thanks also to our sponsor, Churches for Life. Musical credits include H2O by Lee of the Stone, Keikarico by Jumpscare, An Old Soul by New Alchemist, Legends Never Die by Ghost Beats, Wander by ILO, and Thoughtwork by New Alchemist. Smart Justice is a work of Restore Hope. Please consider helping us produce more work like this by becoming a donor at www.smartjustice.org. Thanks again.